Test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the 81 All Out podcast. This is your host, Siddhartha Vaidyanathan, and I'm joined today by a special guest, a veteran cricket writer, columnist, former sports editor of The Pioneer, Hindustan Times, the India Today e-paper, and also the author of two marvelous books on cricket. I can't recommend these books enough. The first one is titled Not Quite Cricket, published in 1999, and the second is titled Not Just Cricket, published in 2021. And so here's extending a very warm welcome to the show to Pradeep Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us, Pradeep.
Thank you, Sidvi. Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Fantastic. Pleasure to be on the show. It's a surprise that you haven't been on the show so far. But I have been thinking of calling you for a long time, but glad you're finally here. Let me tell my listeners that, about these books, one of the most remarkable things about Not Quite Cricket is that it was published a few months before the big match-fixing scandal of 2000 that shook the world. And I say it's remarkable because, it shows you the kind of intuition and journalistic qualities that Pradeep had for him to anticipate such a big story because of how closely he was following cricket and the relationship with money and the kind of shady characters who were getting involved in cricket and things. So not many people, I guess many people knew about it, but not many people wrote about it, and definitely nobody wrote about it in as much depth. So, that is the landmark book as far as I'm concerned. And then, of course, now we recently, a couple of years ago, we had Not Just Cricket, which uses cricket as a backdrop to explore so much more about the country, about the game, about the, various fissures that are dividing us today. And so, yes, please pick them both up. I will put links to it. And Pradeep, I want to start with, the big overarching theme of both the books that you have, especially Not Quite Cricket, is this cricket's relationship with money. And you marvelously, almost detail it so well through your experiences, through your anecdotes and things. And you talk about how in the early 80s, players were earning in a matter of a few hundreds or maybe in the early thousands for a test match and things like that, which is now, of course, we are in the middle of an IPL season and those numbers do not make any sense anymore. So is it fair to say that has been something that has fascinated you, interested you, followed you, and at times you've been at the right place at the right time, like in West Indies in 1997, when you met this shady bookie who you then got to know, and one thing led to the other.
Well, thanks, Sidvi, for a very kind introduction. Well, I would say that the cricket's relationship with money, which, as you said, are the overarching themes of both the books from a cricketing perspective, may have happened inadvertently. It was not as if I planned it that way. But since the link is so strong and so obvious that while I was detailing in the first book my eyewitness accounts of how I discovered or how I felt what was going on, this relationship between bookmakers and players, its possibilities and what it could lead to, it just happened that money had to be a link, whether it is through endorsements, match fees, which is a legitimate exercise because cricket is making enough money for everyone. So it has to be a fair distribution, has to be given to the players who are its main players. It's because of them. But how it kind of twists and plays upon the greed of everyone involved with that money. I think that is what was and is in many ways destabilizing the world of sport, the world of cricket. And from time to time, you just suddenly something explodes on your face. A player is caught, or an administrator, or you realize the corruption, and it leaves a terrible taste, because after all, sport is something which is I mean, it's meant to be enjoyed. These are skills. These are skillful players who have trained, worked hard, and this whole unpredictability of a context, of a performance, it's something which is energizing, it's inspiring, as well as it can lead to despair when your team loses. So these are all the ingredients of great entertainment, great escape from the sorrows of life, in a way, you would say. For it to get tainted because of money leaves everyone diminished, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the starting of Not Quite Cricket, is that remarkable story that you narrate. In 1997, you were in West Indies, you were covering the series, that famous series after which, the 81 All Out podcast takes its name after that Barbados test, in fact, where India were 81 all out. And we thought that it was one of the great heartbreaks. But the fact that journalists at that time were so close to the players was both a boon and a bane. It was a boon because so many journalists used to, sit around with the players and get juicy gossip, get anecdotes and maybe inside stories and things. But it's also a bane because the bookmaker knew that he could use you as the conduit to the players. And he was trying to get you involved. And then eventually, who knows, if you had got involved, and then it could have led to blackmail and much deeper trouble for you as well.
Well, yes, what happened in West Indies in 97 it was not a chance as such that I got involved or I wooed that bookmaker, because, as a journalist, one had seen enough at that point of time to be suspicious of a lot of things. I mean, you could see in cricketing fraternity, the main cricketing fraternity, which was the main stakeholders, people talking about matches may have been rigged, or some players may be on take. Nobody had any proof, but just so much of talk about it. And even in your own watching matches, you could sense there's something wrong. So in West Indies, when that bookmaker, who I didn't know was a bookmaker, but I got suspicious and he got friendly, I got friendly. I played along, as I described in the book what happened. It was a deliberate choice I made to play along so that I also should know as a journalist, and it's my responsibility, my duty to tell my readers if something wrong is happening. The problem at that point was that even journalists there were not as many journalists then as they are today. They were limited, but they had a lot of access because television was just beginning to make its impact more and more, but it wasn't that huge at that time as it's today. And journalists were veteran, a lot of them were veteran journalists who had started their career when there was no television. Like me, I had started my career when there was no television. So the access to players was huge. But the problem, as you say, in that is the access gives you a lot of insights, gives you a lot of stories to tell your readers, but it also makes you fearful of annoying them. So I think there was no one willing to take this risk of writing a story, which obviously they didn't have enough proof. But even to hint at those things, they didn't have the courage because they thought that it will annoy the players and then their access they could lose their access. Maybe I had played a little bit of cricket in Chandigarh. I had a very uncomfortable experience during that period when I knew Kapil well before he became a big star, what he became later. I'd played a little bit of cricket against him. Not that I knew him well, but I happened to know him more and more once I became a journalist. And then once interview he gave me about after 83 World Cup, India came back and walloped by the West Indians, the same West Indies which we had beaten to win the World Cup. They came here and they just dismantled us mentally, physically, every which way. So Kapil happened to come to Chandigarh during after the fourth test, I think, and he was upset at the defeat. Obviously, the World Cup winner captain now being walloped by the same team, and he gave me an interview in which he said that the players were getting more and more distracted. Money was a factor. They were becoming, in a way, what he was saying was they were becoming greedy and not focusing on the game. I knew that interview would make a huge impact, and it could even affect Kapil Dev he would lose trust of his players. Imagine a captain saying these kind of things. I reconfirmed with him that, look, this is exactly what you're saying. Be careful. That do you want all these things to be put in print? He said yes. It got printed. Once it got printed, I was in Indian Express. Indian Express gave it a huge play, a page one story in almost all the editions they had, and they had a network across India. So Kapil obviously got a lot of phone calls in Chandigarh from his friends across India, and he got worried. I met him in the morning because I was a rookie reporter. It was my biggest story ever. It still, I think, is one of my biggest stories. So I thought that even now he may deny it. So I met him. I made it a point to meet him in the morning. And then he said, oh, why did you write money? I meant things you should have. He thought that I should have camouflaged it with saying that they're interested in things and all that. But then he said, okay, it's okay. I will handle it now. Then after a week, he denies that interview. I don't know at that time the reason, but you can well imagine, Sidvi, if you are just beginning your career
Yeah.
and you have such a great interview, and then the fellow who's talked to you says that I never gave that interview, I never said those things. So I was really upset. And that was the first learning lesson I think I realized, is never to trust or never to think you are close to a player. So that made me, I went to the other extreme at times. I kind of would interact with players just like maybe at a press conference, or maybe I would never try to, it's natural when you are interacting with people who are also stars, you also idolize them, no matter how much we say we are journalists, objective. At heart, we are cricket fans.
We are fans.
Yeah. So I kind of went to other extreme, and so I didn't cultivate. I sort of had this feeling that no, I am not trusting these players. So maybe that attitude helped me to do stories which I wasn't that concerned that whether they will like what I write or whether they won't like what I write. I just had made myself insulated from that kind of this thing, which probably helped me as a journalist to do these kind of stories.
But then on the flip side, it probably also restricted your access in some ways, because if a player knew that you are going to maybe upset them or not, they might have been that case of sort of withdrawing from you as well, right?
Surprisingly, as you see in my second book as well, there is a lot of excess, as you were a witness to when we were
Yes.
in Pakistan. And you could walk into a captain's room, and I could talk to him and tell him things. So surprisingly, it didn't. But I guess that was a time when the written word mattered so much. And players were also wary of the fact that they couldn't annoy the journalist too much, because what is written in a paper would impact their career also. So maybe that reason, at least if I would approach them, they would at least talk. Or maybe they also realized, there is another thing as a journalist one has to be careful about, and one has to know also. I want this thing to be told to future journalists who are aspiring journalists or who are doing this work now, that first of all, you need to be very good at the work you're doing. So what is our work? Say if our work is to report on on-field activity at the ground, you should have enough information, knowledge, expertise to analyze that. And even the player, when he reads your report, should feel that he is reading something which is authentic, which he respects you for realizing that, yes, this person knows. I can't fool him. So if you have that ability, plus if you over the years have established yourself as a person who has no agenda, who is not getting used by see, there are lobbies working everywhere. I'm not saying this in a very negative way also. There are lobbies like, okay, players want to become captain, they want to be noticed, they want to establish themselves. Administrators are there who are like, there are power groups. One power group is fighting the other power group. So if over the years you establish in their minds that if this journalist has written something, there must be some truth to it. They straight away identify, okay, this journalist, this lobby, this journalist, this player's lobby. But over the years, if you are established yourself, no lobby, but what you feel is right, you are writing, even the administrators and players take you more seriously, thinking that, look, if he has written, maybe there is a point in it. So this is very important. I would like to assume that I somehow did reach or did aspire to reach that level, which may have, I would like to believe, helped me in my journalism.
For sure. And as you said, at a time when the written word mattered so much, that the postscript to that Kapil interview that you did was that, as Gavaskar wrote in Runs and Ruins, that there was even a moment when he was threatening to withdraw from the final test in Chennai, the famous test when he made 236, the highest score by an Indian batsman at that time. He was threatening to withdraw because Kapil was making these statements. Yeah. So it mattered that much for a great player like Gavaskar to take it so seriously.
Yeah, and later I realized that Kapil had to distract, not because he was denying an interview for, like his motive wasn't to kind of show me in a bad light, but he was under tremendous pressure. There was a board meeting board arranged a meeting in Salve's house. As Gavaskar describes, I came to know these things through Gavaskar only, that there was a meeting in which Kapil was told, why did he say all these things? Because Gavaskar was threatening to withdraw. And he retracted. He said, no, I never said these things. I remember having met Kapil after that in a Ranji game at Faridabad. I remember it vividly. This is the first meeting of mine after that denial. He was sitting with Ashok Malhotra, and those days, Ranji matches, big stars, there was no problem of accessibility there. So I just walked up to him and asked him, why did you do this? So he just laughed. I was having peanuts. I just offered him. He took. He said, "Forget it." So that's how it.
Yeah, I mean, almost an exact similar situation happened to me in 2008 when me along with a colleague of mine had done an interview with MS Dhoni. And where, this was the famous time when he had come back from Australia after winning that CB series, one-day series. It's a huge deal for India. And he was a new captain. He had also won that World Cup before that, the T20 World Cup. And so when I did that interview, I specifically asked him, because before that one-day tournament, many of the senior players were left out. None of them played that one-day series, And so I said, was that, what was your role in that? And he said, he gave me a long answer. And in that it said a message had to be sent across. So that was one part of the quote. Now, that is a headline for me. I mean, come on. You cannot say that and not expect me to run a news story on it. So I ran the news story, but luckily I had the whole thing taped. So I ran the news story, and then 2 days later, he denies saying such a thing. I mean, that news story was picked up by the TV channels and things, and then he denied it. In the Telegraph in Calcutta, he spoke to the cricket editor, cricket reporter there, and denied it. So then we put up the tape, the recording on the website, and we said, he has denied it, but this is what is said. And now I don't know if it is connected or not, but after that he probably never gave anybody any interview. I mean, of course, he has given off and on. He has given, but he has become a very, very shy, very media shy.
I don't think he has. You scared him into silence. Huh?
Well, I don't want to take that much credit also. I mean, I'm sure he's smart enough to realize the games to play. But anyway, I'm just saying this is the kind of things that you face.
Unfolds.
Way it unfolds. Talking about Kapil, though, I mean, for you especially, you touched upon the point as well about being a cricket fan. And for you especially, having grown up, having spent a lot of your formative years in Chandigarh and having seen Kapil and known Kapil and even played with him, you mentioned this lovely little anecdote of him hitting a ball that sort of fractured your finger. I mean, that's so beautiful to even read that. And for you to then go from there to get into the journalist-player relationship and the reality of the situation, there is a certain loss of innocence.
I mean, you know that even if you are not at any level, you can see that talent now. You can see. Kapil was not Kapil for the world at that time. But for people like us, he was a talent which we had never seen something like that. I mean, to physically be present to watch that kind of and that too at a college level. So every one of us knew that this person is something special. So that admiration, that innocence, romance, that feeling once he became a cricketer that, oh, you played against him was different. But once you get into, as you are saying, a relationship or journalist player, which becomes more like a business relationship in a way.
It is,
you have to write wrong things about, if you feel that he's doing something wrong, you have to write about them. So yes, there is a certain loss of, you said innocence. Yeah, there is a certain loss of in a way, I don't know how to put it. Is it faith? Is it the realization that the world is far more complex than what you believed in once you entered this world?
Yeah, and also the whole team dynamics, right? Like when we look at individual talent, we are just looking at them as a single person. But the moment you get into the group dynamics, each person behaves in a different way in a group. I mean, with 3 people, Kapil may behave in a different way, but with 10 people, he's going to behave in a completely different way. So that we don't take into account. Suddenly, when you're in a team, you're hearing 11 different versions about a player. From each one is noticing different things and telling you. And this is like the blind men touching the elephant, right? And trying to make sure what the elephant is.
Absolutely. Like I would like to say that, look, in both the books, especially my second book, where these Kapil Gavaskar relationship, or Azhar Sachin, or Dravid Saurav,
Ganguly Chapel, yeah.
Yeah, Ganguly Chapel. So everything is from a perspective. I am an eyewitness to certain things which somebody else, you on the same tour of Pakistan, may have some different impression of the whole thing. Because you may have been, I can't be witness to things because we never, all the time we were not together. You have a different life, a different relationship with players. So your eyewitness accounts may not be matching mine. And mine might not be, my truth is my truth. I'm trying to supplement it with the factual narration of what happened so that it obviously remains my truth. I'm not saying that this happened. I'm saying this happened, what I saw happen.
Yeah.
And also once you realize these relationships are between great players, or if there is certain amount of envy or jealousy, or see, they are players. We idolize them as players. We think because they are such great cricketers, they would be some kind of saints, but they are human beings. You want to become a captain. I want to become a captain. I want a better batting slot than yours. And your performance affects my chances in the team if I am not in the team. So this interplay of human emotions and human vulnerability is there with everyone. So once you see that, in a way, you also realize that in this world, being talented, skillful in a particular field doesn't give you immunity from what human condition is or human situation is.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you are brought to the ground in one way or the other, irrespective of the height of your talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, talking about that, sticking with this player-journalist relationship, I mean, there was a time, it appears from your reading it and also from me, like I started following in the late 80s. There was a time in the 80s and 90s when the journalists mattered so much that, them just merely writing that this player is, should be selected could actually be taken seriously by the selectors. And, there was almost like some journalists, I'm not saying all, but some who wrote for certain outlets had this power to even influence selectors and influence administrators and things. So given that, and given that players' relationship that cannot be that healthy, right? For journalism or for cricket or for objectivity or for anything. I mean, there is a certain overwhelming power that some journalists had, which was often misused also. Yeah.
There in my second book, Not Just Cricket, there is this small bit on Gavaskar, Rajan Bala, whom I respect hugely. A lot of people respect. He was wonderful narrator of cricket stories and immense knowledge of the game. But on my tour to New Zealand in '94, I debated on whether to put that Rajan Bala Gavaskar interaction and how Rajan relationship with Gavaskar. Should I write or not write? Because I didn't want it to appear as if I'm being disparaging to anyone, to Rajan. Yeah. Rajan was a great help to me as well. But I thought I would include it just to show that this, as we were describing this, because Rajan had huge power at that time. During one period of time, probably he would select an Indian team. What he wrote mattered so much. In fact, it mattered so much. I still remember that once I became a journalist, and Kapil was a big player then. He later became the captain. And when I went to New Zealand, it was my second tour, '94 New Zealand tour, same tour I'm talking about, Rajan Bala. And when Kapil saw me, he realized that, okay, this guy has graduated from Ranji League to an international tour.
International cricket. He has been selected for international cricket.
Yeah. So he was happy. He hugged me. He said, "Oh, very good." And then he said, he gave me an advice. He said, "You should aspire to write like Rajan Bala."
Oh, okay.
So what I'm trying to say is that was what Rajan Bala's position among even cricketers was. That he was advising. Rajan Bala for him in cricket journalism was like Kapil Dev probably in Indian cricket. So he said you should write like him if you want to become big and this thing. Now the same Rajan Bala I write in the book, which I said that I was wondering whether I include, not include. I didn't want to. Feel like as if I am disparaging him or something. But I thought that it was not. I was not disparaging. I was just trying to show this. If a journalist uses his power to control, in a way, how selections are done or whether the player is good, great or not, and his word should matter, I should tell the readers that it happens. It's not healthy, but that's the reality. And in fact, I've seen Rajan going up to Tendulkar. During one test match, there was a period when Tendulkar used to get out of playing across the line, which a lot of people used to write that he has this flaw, he plays across the line. No. Now, Rajan took me with me. There was I think India were playing Sri Lanka. There was a rain delay and Tendulkar was in the net somewhere with the bat in his hand. Rajan told me from the press box, "Come." See, Rajan had this huge, he would encourage youngsters to I'll show you what the cricket world is like. And so he took me, went straight to Tendulkar and told him that, "Look, you should stop playing that shot." This is what he would tell this to players on their face. So he told him,
I've heard he even told Viv Richards once about some technical thing, and Viv Richards looked at him as if who is this person?
So he tells Sachin that, and I could see Sachin was annoyed, but out of sheer respect for Rajan, obviously he knew who Rajan was and they knew each other well. He didn't say anything. He said something dismissively that maybe people think like that, and he shrugged his shoulder. Rajan got upset at Sachin having treated him dismissed him like that. He came back, he told the statistician, give me all the statistics where Sachin has been bowled playing across the line. And I was sure that he would be writing a scathing piece on Sachin, that how he should correct his technique.
Yeah, I mean, we are laughing about it now, but that was seriously taken. That was all serious at that time.
Power was such that was seriously taken. People would believe what Rajan was writing because he had the stature, and I think he had the knowledge also to write like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I no offense meant to him, and I've read many of his columns when I was growing up, and also read his books, and he had a marvelous insight into technique and cricket's history and lovely play of language and everything. But just the thought that a journalist cricket journalist carried so much power so as to influence selection, so as to be able to advise cricketers of the stature of Tendulkar. I mean, it's unbelievable today. I mean, imagine any journalist today. I mean, forget, anyone today actually going to Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma and saying, you are doing this. I mean, it's absurd to say the least.
And for life, he will be. And for life.
I mean, that is number one. But number two, I mean, the very thought cannot even enter people's heads. I mean, that is, and also, of course, the evolution has been such that I don't think journalists of today share anywhere close to that rapport as Rajan would have with all these players, and they would even be willing to excuse his sort of going over the top because he was so respected.
Yeah, true, very true.
Yeah. The thing about one of the things in, just moving on a bit to, from the 80s and Kapil and things to a little more of the 90s bit and the money aspect. The one thing about Not Quite Cricket, which I felt my favorite part of the book. I mean, the first part is, it's wonderful as well. But the second part, I think, is much more philosophical, where you are actually trying to get to the root of the problem. Like, why is it likely that players are likely to succumb to this greed? And you sort of get to the heart of the issue being the inequality and the inequality in the incomes between how cricket was getting bigger and bigger and bigger at the international level. But, at the domestic level, things were still at very much stagnant. And the money hadn't risen. You do some interviews, interestingly, with Ajay Sharma, who was later to get embroiled in the whole controversy. But at that time, I think he was not yet caught. But he actually, has quite profound thoughts on how, the game has stagnated. The player fees are not there. The Ranji Trophy profile was very, very low. And it's actually, in a way, not too different from today. I mean, of course, the IPL is a domestic tournament, people can say, and it is huge. But still, if you compare what the visibility and the pay that an IPL star gets compared to a domestic player, it's still huge. I mean, Ranji Trophy cricketers, to be fair, get paid pretty well today. But still, the difference is massive, right? So, and it continues even now.
Yeah, you see, since I had covered Ranji Trophy extensively during my younger days and when I started my career, Ranji used to get lead display in newspapers. There wasn't so much of international cricket as such. Now, today, every day, there is either a T20 match, one-day match, Test cricket, plus IPL consumes you so much that there is no space left for domestic cricket, especially Ranji Trophy, to cover. And our time, because I covered it so extensively, so I had seen the gaps between these two worlds. A gap between Kapil Dev and somebody who's just started playing his career, traveling in trains, in third-class compartments, not much daily allowance, and the control and power of the administrators over them, the way selections used to take place. I had seen that all. And in the book, I thought it's important to place the first part in a larger context that, look, if your base is so wobbly and so unequal, what do you expect these players? See, there is Ajay Sharma in this book, which nobody knew who's involved and who's not involved. But Ajay Sharma was willing to take on the board to say, see, you need players to also not only tell you in private that this is wrong, but to say, okay, fine, quote me. I mean, that lends, if I had written all those things on my own, it wouldn't have given it that kind of credibility or authenticity. It would have been my opinion. Now, these are players who have played that game, who have traveled like that, who have seen how the cricketing world they were born into was. So I thought I'll detail them, and I think nice of Ajay Sharma to have given that interview. So I remember that once the names were revealed of people who were involved, and Kapil Dev also was till a substantial period of time a suspect. There was a reviewer who wrote the review of the book that what is the credibility of this journalist, that he's writing on match fixing, and the two of the players he's extensively like quoting are now themselves involved. Fair enough. I in fact write in my second book that this, but I wasn't aware who is involved or who is not involved. I was quoting people who were willing to. I had access to obviously there were North Indian cricketers I had access to, because Kapil in that first book talks about, in fact, if you see that Kapil chapter in which he talks about the structure of cricket, how it should change, it shows that Kapil was way ahead of his times even then, even earlier he was, and even later, to how to get more and more money into the game. So it has its positive aspects. It obviously has its negative aspects. So Kapil was someone who realized that getting more money into the game would help it, obviously. It has helped him immensely, and nothing wrong in it. It's fine. But in that interview, he says that once the player gets rich enough, he will speak up. He will. The good thing about money is that once the players get money which they are not getting their due, they will be outspoken. The board will become better. But unfortunately, the reverse.
Unfortunately, that didn't materialize.
In fact, they become more and more slaves of the board. In fact, earlier players had more courage to speak against the board. Maybe the money stakes weren't that high. Now the money stakes are so high that they have become even like less and less outspoken.
Well, to be fair to Kapil, though, he was also behind the ICL, the Indian Cricket League, which was the precursor to the Indian Premier League, and in fact, which probably triggered this whole board to come up to hasten the establishment of the Indian Premier League. So maybe he was talking from that perspective.
No,
if there is a kind of a parallel league running where players are making money, then maybe they will be emboldened to speak up. But now nobody will, because the IPL is very much part of the BCCI, and there's nothing different about the two, right?
In a way, if you see that chapter on Kapil Dev, now I think of it, it's in a way he was giving a blueprint for the future of how the game should be run and how money should be made. And hats off to him in a way that he had foreseen it and he had thought about it even then how it should go ahead. It's the way it has gone ahead.
Yes, and absolutely, he was a visionary from that regard. I mean, this interview was probably done in the late 90s, and he foresaw what came.
97, I think, 98. It must have been done. So.
98, and he foresaw what happened 10 years later when the IPL started. Yeah, exactly. Which brings me to the point, though. I mean, now we are in this situation where, see, you talk about the earlier era when you were traveling by train to cover the matches. The players were traveling by train to cover to play the matches. There was not much TV. There was not much money. So in a way, there was a kind of a frequency match between you and the players, because you were sort of living similar lives. At least from that point. But now the rift between player and journalist is so high. And, of course, many journalists are making some good money, and very good that is happening. But I'm saying that the extent of inequality, the difference is so high that it's almost like the two can't really talk to each other in those terms.
Now that as you say this, I remember going to Kapil's house very often in Chandigarh. Once became a reporter, and whenever he would come from his international assignments and he would come back to meet his parents or stay there for a couple of days, his house was like any middle class house at that time. These days, when you walk into, if you are lucky enough to get an entry into a cricketer's or a top cricketer's house, it's like walking into a 5-star hotel. It's like a room in a 5-star hotel. You enter and you get intimidated. I'm sure these kind of huge gaps in disparity in the lifestyles of the two would also make, I'm sure as a human being, it kind of creates a wall where it's difficult to have a proper insight into the other side, which I think we were lucky. We were not lucky that we didn't have much money, so we were unlucky that way. But when I look back, I don't see that money was a barrier in our development as a journalist or in a way, it was a help in understanding. You see, let's not forget that all these players who have made it big and who have a lot of money, once upon have lived their lives like us only in middle class houses with not too much of money. So they have seen a life and they have they transcended that life and good luck to them, great, because of their skills and because of the following of the game. They have jumped the queue. They have jumped that queue and from last to suddenly they are propelled to the first place. That also probably makes them more insecure, I think. That's why maybe they are not that outspoken now because they feel that they have a lot to lose. Earlier cricketers probably didn't feel that they had too much to lose. So that could be one reason that why you find present day, especially Indian cricketers, so timid in a way. Sorry to use that word, but they are in terms of social issues, in terms of taking a stand on an issue. They just keep quiet.
But again, as you said, isn't it inevitable? I mean, see, in a way, if you look at the system overall, there are very, very few unhappy people, right? I mean, even the most bottom rung cricketers who are probably, just playing like a few games of domestic cricket every year. I'm saying bottom rung first class cricketers. Of course, there are many more below that, but bottom rung first class cricketers are probably getting a fair share of money. And then they are playing all these other, they're probably playing some of the T20 leagues that are happening, or they're playing some other, tournaments that are getting money. So when you have a system where everybody is happy, and, journalists also are, in a way, much more well remunerated today than they were, say, even 5 or 10 years ago. Where, how can you have that resistance, right? You need some kind of unhappiness for that rebellion or resistance.
I mean, I'm not sure, because it does seem with money or with greed, there is nothing is enough. Like you start comparing your life with the life. See, a Ranji cricketer, if he's getting good money, what is that good money to what a IPL top cricketer is getting? It's no comparison. So you aspire for more and you become more and more tense and you become more and more competitive, and more competitiveness. On field competitiveness is different, but otherwise competitiveness also has its ugly aspects which make you do things which you otherwise would normally not do because you want to go ahead in life. So this is a very complex thing, that where to draw a line of satisfaction that, okay, this is enough, I don't need more.
Yeah, I mean, like that book that has come out, which has quite revealed quite a lot of interesting things, written by the cop, the Delhi cop, Neeraj Kumar, where he talks about the corruption at the lower levels and how people are willing to do anything to get their children selected, whether it means favors or whatever, and all the interconnected corruption that happens, which we don't really hear about, because unlike the match fixing scandal of 2000, the stars are not involved, but still there is like a labyrinth of corruption that is happening at various levels.
Yeah, and I knew that book was very revealing to me as well, because it just shows that maybe things have gotten worse, because he also quotes this Ajay Sharma thing, which I have in the book. He told me about that bookie putting 100 rupee note in his Ajay's pocket. He was a kid, he hit 100. So now at the same level, if in these minor leagues, IPL minor leagues in states and in districts, these are young cricketers playing, and bookmakers are like those managers who spot the talent and think that, okay, let me cultivate this player. In future, he might become bigger and he will payoff would be far greater. So if at that level corruption is widespread, as that book reveals, and Neeraj Kumar was the anti-corruption head of Indian board, so he has documented all those things. And as he himself writes in the book, that this could explode, because these cricketers, even if 1% or 2% among these cricketers, 2% play for India, play in the main IPL, just wonder what must be happening or what would happen. So these are very scary thoughts, and I know we all say that corrective measures should be taken. Board is insensitive to this, which is true. But at the scale at which cricket is played in India, the number of people playing in India, the number of businessmen trying to get into the cricketing world to make money, and the number of bookmakers there must be, because betting industry is huge. If you can create an unreal cricket match in Chandigarh, Mohali, and show it live on TV, creating an impression that the match is being played in Lanka, it's a Lanka league. This has happened.
Yes.
Just imagine the level at which all these things and the depth at which all these things are taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that book actually, it reminded me of the famous scandal that happened in Italian football, where what was happening for many, many years was that all these, players at the much lower levels and much lower clubs were getting, these corrupt mafia, so to speak, the bookies were basically trapping them. So the higher and higher they went in the football, when they reached the highest level, they were still being blackmailed, because they were saying that, we are compromised now. So then what happened is that there was this whole nexus of compromised players in control of these corrupt players. And this could well be our future at some point.
I mean, in that book, there are these minor leagues where all the owners of those leagues are involved. Even the umpires, the messages are passed through umpires to the players what to do and what not to do. And it's a world which you just shudder to imagine that if you're watching a main big match, I mean, what prevents you to imagine that same thing might maybe happening someday there also?
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about fixing, though, the one figure that I have to mention and sort of which fascinates me and at multiple layers is Azharuddin. I mean, Azhar meant something to an Indian fan growing up in the 80s. There was sort of just the sheer nature of his batting, but also the story and everything, it came together. It was like the perfect Bollywood script. And like many Bollywood scripts, it also had to end in a way that we could not have imagined, but probably ought to have imagined the way it ended. And how was it for you, as a journalist at that time? I mean, of course, you were a fan before that, but when Azhar started, you were already a journalist. And just to see the evolution of his career and to then see that, to be witness to that fall.
Well, I think in my second book, Not Just Cricket, I have a substantial chapter on Azhar and my first tour to England in 96. He was the captain of the team. I had many interactions with him, which I detailed in that. Also, I had seen certain things before the match fixing scandal actually broke. From as you were saying, intuition or following the game, I had seen certain things which had made me very, very suspicious of his doings. And I had started writing. I was in Pioneer then. A lot of people would say you're being very nasty to him. You have some personal grudge. I mean, he was a great cricketer. There is no doubt one of the finest batsmen too. In fact, he and Lakshman I would say Azhar would rate Azhar higher than Lakshman in terms of the aesthetics of batting. The way they're similar styles, but Azhar was probably way ahead. And his fitness, his fielding, he would lend a aura to the game, a charm to the game, which I don't think any other Indian cricketer has. And yet, when I was reporting at that time, I would be very critical of him, and maybe at times unnecessary, I thought. Because in my mind, I thought, I was convinced that he was involved. See, this book came later. The book also I wouldn't have written unless, or the story which I did, I wouldn't have done unless I had certain, I mean, I was convinced that yes, this is happening, but how do you tell your readers this is happening? Even the investigators who have caught these players had to set them free because you have to prove their linkage of money, transactions. As a journalist, you have neither those investigating skills nor the resources. Yet I found this a way, because there is this bookmaker who's telling me all these things, and I'm just writing a simple story saying there is a bookmaker who's saying I can offer this much money to even a journalist if he gets him in touch with players. Then I talked to none else than the Indian captain, then Sachin Tendulkar, before doing the story, and this off-the-record conversation in which on the record, he says that, don't ask me, but off the record, I thought that should I write this off the record, but I thought there is no harm. It doesn't put him in bad light. In fact, it puts him in good light. He's telling me that I have also heard all these things and you should record his conversations. So what I'm saying is that Azhar was part of that tour. And all I could see a sulking Azhar in that team because he was removed as captain. But I had great admiration. You interact with Azhar. He was he wouldn't speak much, but he was a relaxed, simple. I mean, it's very difficult to fathom these two Azhars. The one who is, say, accused of fixing, and the one who is so friendly, so gentle, and so very
Filled out.
Yeah, and pious in many ways. As people say, he would follow his religious ethics or edicts to the T almost. But it's human beings are hard to understand and fathom.
So just curiously, you spoke to Sachin on that tour. You spoke to Mother Lal on that tour. Even though you might have been getting a lot of signals, you didn't approach Azhar, or did you approach him and you didn't write it?
No, I didn't approach Azhar then because, I mean, as a reporter, there was one way was Sachin's way, don't do the story now, let's tap his phones, and Sachin's response that he also has heard things made it very obvious to me that he's also if the Indian captain is worried about these things and he has heard about it, obviously he would be privy to far more than what he's willing to tell me. I'm not his friend. I'm not his trusted this thing. It's just a journalist-player interaction. So, what was the question? What the thread was that?
No, the thread was how come you didn't think of speaking to Azhar?
Yeah, Azhar was. I could see Azhar sulking on that tour. He was aloof. He generally, even as a captain, wouldn't mix much. But the impression one got was that he was unhappy with having been removed as captain. Maybe I should have, but I was leaving after the test match. I didn't stay back for the one day. I was leaving, and Pioneer editor then was Chandan Mitra. He was keen that the story is done from the West Indies itself. The deadline should be the West Indies because I had kept him in loop. I was telling him everything, and we were planning when to do the story. So we wanted some official quote, even if it was of denial. That's why I fixed up an interview with Tendulkar, which he was gracious enough to agree to. In fact, he treated me to a couple of rums. So, though the bill of that table was paid by another fan, because once the bill came, somebody rushed in and said, no, I want to pay, and got his autograph from Sachin, I think. So, maybe one should have gone deeper into it at that time, but I thought I had enough for that moment to tell the world that, look, be careful, there is something happening which we need to know.
No, my only sort of counterfactual in my imagination was, had you approached Azhar, whether his behavior would have changed, because he would know that, okay, people are watching. Or I don't know, but of course he probably knew people are watching.
I met Azhar in Bangladesh after he came back as captain. I think it was Independence Cup.
Independence Cup, that famous...
I met Azhar there, and after my writings on match fixing, Azhar had become very, very nice to me. He would...
Oh, okay.
Azhar, in fact, called me over for lunch. He was with Sangeeta Bijlani then. He was his wife.
Oh, yeah, you report that.
I've written in the book. And Azhar, I remember Azhar telling me certain things that, oh, Prabhakar, I know what he has done, which I quote in that book also. The thought strikes in my mind that why is Azhar thinking that Prabhakar is going to name him as the cricketer who's offered him 24 lakhs? Because Prabhakar, even we don't know who Prabhakar is. I mean,
he has only said it is a big cricketer. He has not said anything more.
So who that big cricketer was a big question then, till Bindra revealed it on CNN that Prabhakar has told him that it's so and so. Nobody knew who it was. There was speculation. And here is Azhar telling me that I know, if he's referring to me, I know what he has done. So it's a big mystery that even what Azhar thought maybe that Prabhakar is referring to him turned out to be Prabhakar was referring to somebody else. So it's still a mystery.
Given it's interesting now that we are now, talking about a time when cricket has never been flushed with so much money as it was. I mean, of course, we are talking about a time when cricket didn't have as much money. It was growing. But I recently saw a tweet of yours where you said that given your sort of experience and your understanding of this whole situation, you feel that these things are still happening. What led you to say that, and is it something that is there something more that we need to know?
I mean, I had just finished reading Neeraj Kumar's book. My own little bit understanding of the sport itself. Somehow during that period there was no T20. Mark, I am sure that had T20 been popular then, because T20 affords you a lot of leverage. You can you can bowl a full toss saying that it is a Yorker, it can happen. You can get out on a full toss regularly because you are hitting wildly.
Trying to hit.
So the suspicions of that era that the batsman got deliberately out. In T20, it's hard to say what is deliberate and what is everyone has a license to do these things.
Get out.
Limited.
In fact, it is good to get out at many times.
Yeah, it's good to get out also, and because you're taking so many risks. If Surya Kumar Yadav is so admired for the skills of creating these innovative shots like A.B. de Villiers, I mean, these are the same shots. If somebody gets out playing those shots, nobody will say, why did you play this shot?
Sure.
And also the chance element in T20 cricket is so high, like that you're not sure whether it is planned or not planned or just happened. So what I'm saying is, if T20 was then, its spread greater would have been there, no doubt, because given the scale at which we realized that fixing was taking place. Now, today, when you watch this and when I correlated with Neeraj Kumar's book, I wonder, are a lot of things which we feel are incredibly lucky or wonderful, are they being, at some moment of time, I'm not saying everything is happening like that, but even, as I said, 1%, if there's something wrong happening, it will damage the whole thing. So, and plus, as you said earlier, there is some certain kind of an intuition, which I hope I'm totally wrong, but I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, the sort of the worrying signal comes from these companies that are claiming to be this fantasy league and trying to have this games going on, but actually a lot of what they're doing seems very much like betting. It's like how much will this person score today, or will they score more than 20 or less than 30? I mean, all this is essentially betting, but they are treating it like as if it's a game of skill. So that is that gray area that is considerably worrying, and that industry seems to be getting astronomically big in India today.
Another thing which strikes me after what you were saying is that we are in a world today where for a journalist to get into that world is a very, very difficult thing. Earlier, as a journalist, you would be invited to any gathering which would take place during a match, may it be an official dinner. Your interactions were huge. Today, every stakeholder of the sport, be it a businessman, be it a middleman, be it
agent
endorsing the products, have access to all this thing. Journalists have the least access to that world. So that world is closed in a way for journalists to see and probe what is happening, which is unfortunate.
Absolutely. Like your kind of relationship, your interviews that you did with Sachin and Madan Lal. I mean, which journalist can do with an Indian captain or an Indian coach today?
Yeah, it's not their fault. It's the way we have built the system. There are walls.
Absolutely. And I think now also players and don't need journalists anymore. I mean, unlike Sachin, who would have respected you to the extent because what you wrote in the paper mattered, whether it mattered to him or not, I don't know, but it mattered to cricketers in general. But now what people write does not matter anymore. I guess maybe TV has that bit of thing yet. What is big on TV, maybe they care about. But even that, TV has such a bad name that they can always say that, these guys are just peddling fake news.
True.
Yeah, I think that's definitely worrying. And that Neeraj Kumar book, again, I will link to it. I would suggest people read it. I mean, had that book come out in the 90s, it would have made such a huge splash. But the very fact that hardly anybody has spoken about it. I think I've read 2 or 3 reviews of the book. Sharda, of course, wrote a review, and you have mentioned the book and a few things, but that's it. I mean, it's almost
there will be silence. There will be silence from the establishment. When I wrote my story for Pioneer in 97, I mean, literally as if I had committed a crime from a board's perspective. They'd say that he's damaging the name of the game, he's damaged this, he's damaged that. They wrote a letter to Sachin Tendulkar saying that you have damaged cricket. So Sachin had done nothing. So the establishment would always react in silence to these because they don't want this to get more and more publicity. They want that let it die on its own death. Let us not react.
And also, I think from my experience, and you can speak about it better, it's like there's also hardly any kind of cohesion or unity among the journalistic fraternity. Like when you wrote that story in 97, the journalists, instead of, being curious and supporting you and wanting to find out more and doing follow-up stories, they were actually like blaming you or they were deriding you.
That's also because the organizations, I think, these kind of stories are liked by people in the sense that, is this happening? No, it became a big story. And now journalists who were writing on cricket at that time obviously must have been asked by their organizations that is it really happening? Why did you miss it then? So they had no choice but to conveniently say that, this fellow is writing rubbish. I mean, I don't know how to put it. I am not. I don't want to seem trying to say that they were wrong or this thing. But what is surprising is that 96, 97, almost every person who was connected with cricket would only talk about our match is being fixed. So and so player is involved. So and so. So when you are so much deep into the talking about it, if somebody has written about it, without saying that players are taking money. I'm not saying players are. I'm saying there is a bookmaker who's offering money. So you should actually be happy that somebody has written. Okay, I have not written, somebody else has written. So at least it's in public domain now that this possibility is there. But I guess work pressures, their own hierarchy in your own organizations, and insecurities play a role in your taking public stance.
No, and that continues today even. I mean, it's the same thing. And, there is a lot of cutthroat competition, but the cohesion continues to, I mean, and at least the little bit I saw of, like a traveling English journalist group or a traveling Australian journalist group there, if somebody did a big story, there would invariably be a follow-up from multiple sources. But, that element seems to have been missing in Indian cricket journalism forever.
You talk about the divide, and you were part of cricket reporting then when Greg and Ganguly spat was taking place, and then you figure in the book part of what happened in Pakistan in 2005. You are also aware of the fact that time there became two lobbies.
Yes,
journalism.
The Ganguly lobby and the Chappell lobby.
One was the Ganguly lobby and one was the Greg lobby. So I was seen as a Ganguly lobby part because I was defending Saurav. I mean, now both accounts, whether Ganguly was right or Greg was right, are subject to interpretation. And as we were talking earlier, who was where witness to what?
Yes. And again, I mean, that was also probably the last phase in Indian cricket where what you wrote mattered. But so, now, irrespective of what you write, people can always find ways to either brush it aside or, paint you as a anti-national or whatever, do whatever they want.
I mean, it's sad to see a written word having no meaning at all in a way.
No meaning at all. And which is what I want to actually ask you about as we, slowly start to wrap up is, a journalist of today. I mean, you've been someone who has seen the world of journalism and cricket for so long, but a journalist of today, somebody who is entering the profession, obviously everyone enters with a sense of idealism. Everyone enters, you're early in your 20s. So there is a certain dream that you have, and you probably going to get crushed pretty soon. But were you 20 today? How would you approach this ecosystem?
Well, if I was 20 today, I would also be different from what I was 20.
Of course.
The world was different. I mean, in many ways it was different. In many ways it's just the same. But a 20-year-old journalist today for him, IPL would obviously be the most important event of India's cricketing calendar. T20 cricket would for him be huge. And he would also at 20 be aspiring to interview big cricketers, to know more, to tell his readers more. I'm not saying his or her readers more. I'm not saying that today's 20-year-old would be anyway less or more intelligent or dull. He will be as dreamy-eyed, as eager and enthusiastic to do his job well. Unfortunately, I think the hurdles he would face is far greater than what I think I faced then, because there's no access, as we are saying. Written word has become irrelevant. So what does he do? I think there are certain basics, I guess, which one should never forget, and they remain always the same. That's again, he should train himself. He should know his subject very well. It's very important. It's the most important thing for a journalist is whichever subject he's dealing with, he should be almost master of that. I have seen journalists being almost lured into believing that so-and-so cricketer is good or so-and-so cricketer is bad, because that journalist himself or herself has no understanding of that sport. If somebody would come to me and say a young Virat Kohli, and somebody has something against him and tell him that people are saying this fellow is good, have you seen him? He's not a good cricketer. Now, if my judgment of sport is good enough, I have seen that young Virat kid playing, I'll tell him what rubbish are you talking. There is no compromise for not knowing. It's not, you don't go there as a fan saying that I know Virat. You see, unfortunately, you can see a scoreboard, and unfortunately, you can write 10,000 words, chhe chakke, and you say, oh, big hitter, ye, wo. The reality may be that fellow played badly that day. Second is because the money transactions have become so huge, and a journalist today, even in our times, we would be invited for dinners and drinks, which was the ultimate of kind of bribing us.
Yes, of course. Of course. In fact, there was a tweet recently I saw, not recently, like a few years ago, that I saw when they said, I have no respect for the journalist of the 90s. And of course, that was a generalization. But that person was saying, I have no respect for the journalist of the 90s because as rampant match fixing was going on, they were sitting and cooking and eating meals with the players and all that.
So what I was saying is that in our time, since there was not that much of money in the game,
yes,
it was limited to like, okay, inviting you or giving you a small gift. Today, the money is so huge. I can't imagine if some journalist is influential in today's time, how much these IPL owners or even Indian board, to what extent can they influence his opinion, what it can be offered. So he has to be that, he or she or that person has to be his integrity, it has to be, because he'll be tempted in multiple ways to become part of a lobby. So you have to be mindful of these things when you enter this profession. Don't enter this profession thinking that, you will meet Virat Kohli and you will interview him and you will sit with Rohit Sharma and he'll treat you to dinner. If that is your intention, then you're not doing any good to yourself also and to the profession as well. So I would advise them, whatever the hardships and whatever the hurdles, don't forget the basics of what it means to be a journalist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unlike us, when we enter the field, the journalist of today is also up against, this huge influencer ecosystem, where you have people with like millions of followers on social media and things who are, posting things about cricketers, some of which is advertising, some of which is just news. You don't even know many times, is this like a promoted tweet or is this? So what is it? Nobody knows. Who is feeding that to them? Nobody knows. Then they come up with these sources, stories and all that. So journalist of today is up against that. And I don't envy them one bit because, ultimately they want to have their credibility on the line. While these influencers, today they get something wrong, tomorrow again they will come back. I mean, nobody's really, they're not going to lose their jobs.
Yeah. You need to sharpen your basic skills far more than maybe when I was at 20. I wasn't up against, or we weren't up against so many hurdles as today's journalist would be.
Absolutely. And finally, of course, I mean, as a umbrella to all this, and you have been, you write, of course, about the emergency in the 70s and about the highly politicized situation in India through the 70s, 80s, and, you write about Punjab and things. But overarching in this whole cricketing discourse is the political control that cricket in India is now under. And, at least in my watching, I don't think the party in power has been so entwined with the running of the game to the extent that Jay Shah, who is now running the game, is, Amit Shah's son. And it's, of course, I'm not saying that Indira Gandhi and all the Congress party were all not doing this. I mean, I'm not getting into this whataboutery, but the direct line to the cricket's top chair to the party in power is worrying in all sorts of ways. I mean, starting with the simple thing of having a chariot relay in the morning of a test match is the least of the problems, but it is, it starts from there.
One of the least publicized chapters in the book, which I feel is the board politics, is when I this chapter on how a Prime Minister influences the board election in 1990, how politics starts taking deeper and deeper roots in Indian cricket, and how there is a time when party affiliation in board politics didn't matter. You could be a congressman, you could be a BJP person, but you wanted to control it together. And to the point now today that the party affiliation is the most important thing. It's like the curve is going sharper and sharper and more upwards. So I write this and I detail how abductions take place even in winning an election. And all these are eyewitness accounts. These are not my opinions as such. One thing I took very great care in the book is not to mention anything which is an opinion. I mean, there is opinion in the book is our eyewitness accounts. Obviously, I pick and choose everything. But whatever I thought was important as an eyewitness account, I write. In even the board politics, I write about things which show the very scary and dangerous signs of control. A control which cricket today obviously will become even more and more vehicle for a political party for propaganda. Nationalism, cricket, sport are intertwined. You can use one for the other, and which is in a way being used, as you said, the chariot, the two prime ministers in a chariot ride in a stadium. So, I mean, all we can do is write about them. As a journalist, we can write about them. I mean, our job is not to think whether we can influence the future course of history. Our job is to at least chronicle it and chronicle it honestly and warn people in a way of what are the pitfalls of what is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to see where this is ending, though I think all of us know pretty much where it could go, and the kind of the kind of propaganda, I think, is the good word for it. Because, when it came to match fixing, one of the things was that it was once we knew what had happened, it was hard to even trust what you're watching in front of your eyes anymore. It's like, is he getting out, or has he got out, or is he purposely got himself out? And as you say, with T20 and with this propaganda machinery and everything coming in, then it's a similar thing. Your trust of what you see in front of you will start to diminish, because you don't know, are you being played? Are you being cheated? Are you being conned into believing this, or are you actually seeing it? And, with technology reaching a stage where, you can actually manipulate so much, then, the possibilities are endless and very, very scary, honestly.
True, very true.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, thank you so much, Pradeep, for joining me. This has been wonderful. It's also been a great chance for me to chat with you about the old times. I'm not that old, but good old times. I must mention that I had a wonderful time in Pakistan in 2006 with Pradeep. We were together during that tour, and often when you're on tour, when you're away from home, it's always great to have like a companion to hang out with. And there were times when, we spent a lot of time both during the game and after. So fond memories of that. And thank you for these books, and especially, writing so honestly and chronicling, as you're saying, as you just said, chronicling what happened, because I'm sure that, 10, 20 years down the line, these will be invaluable documents for people to look back and draw the line between that moment in 1983 when you interviewed Kapil to, the present time, when pretty much what he said is what has happened. So, thank you for all the work and books too.
Thank you, Sidvi. It's wonderful talking to you, and I enjoyed this conversation and wish you all the best. And once in India, please get in touch. We should meet again.
Absolutely. Would love to. I mean, I haven't been to Delhi in a while, but would definitely want to be there at some point to catch up. COVID, of course, was a big reason for not coming, but now I think I should plan a trip. Anyway, regular reminders to our listeners, 81allout.com is our website. You can, rate and review our podcast on any of the medium that you listen to. If you review it, then more people can find us. So that's very helpful. Also, thanks a lot for your support for the books that we have been republishing. We recently came out with a classic work by Gideon Hay, The Summer Game, which was one of his early books. We have republished it now. It's the history of Australian cricket in the 1950s and 60s. And it's a marvelous book looking at history. Then we also, before that, republished Mike Marquis's The War Minus the Shooting, about the 1996 World Cup, where, of course, Pradeep is mentioned in the acknowledgements section. And Cricket Beyond the Bazaar by Mike Coward, which is a fabulous book about Australia's tours to India in the 1980s. So I'll put links to all of that. Please pick it up. And we'll join you in a week or 10 days for our next podcast.
Won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wide.